We thought it would be the same. By the summer of 1941, Europe had taught us that lesson again and again. Poland folded in weeks. France in days that felt like a parade. Borders moved faster than our supply trucks. Each victory made the next one feel inevitable, like history itself had chosen a side. We were young enough or foolish enough to believe that momentum was a law of nature. When the order came to move east, no one said the word if. Only when. At dawn, the sky over the frontier burned red with artillery. It was familiar, almost comforting, the same thunder we had heard in the west. We crossed the line thinking the Soviet Union would crack the way the others had. One hard blow, a few encirclements, and then the long march home wearing medals. Columns advanced endlessly. Villages fell without a fight or were already abandoned, doors swinging in the wind. Prisoners came in by the thousands, silent, hollow-eyed, poorly equipped. We laughed about it then. This is the giant, we said. This is all there is, but the land did not end. Every day we marched, and the horizon stayed just as far away. Roads turned to dust, then mud. The victories came fast, and in numbers so large they were hard to grasp. Entire Soviet armies seemed to vanish inside our maps. Minsk, Smolensk, names that meant little to us then, but each one marked by enormous circles drawn in pencil, tightening day by day. When the pockets finally closed, the prisoners came in waves that never seemed to end. We stood by the roads and watched them pass. In the West, encirclement meant the end. A trapped force surrendered, the campaign moved on, and the war felt almost orderly. Here, it was different. Even as we took prisoners by the tens of thousands, gunfire still cracked behind us. Small groups broke out at night. Others fought until they had nothing left, not because it made sense, but because stopping was not an option for them anymore. After every encirclement, the next fight became slower, bloodier. The Soviet soldiers learned. They dug deeper, camouflaged better, counterattacked without warning. Tanks appeared where intelligence said none remained. We noticed it first in the eyes of the prisoners. Early on, they looked defeated. Later, they looked angry. The ones still fighting no longer ran. They let us advance, then struck supply lines, rear units, anything soft. The front stopped being a line and became something fluid and dangerous. By then, the numbers no longer impressed us. Yes, we surrounded armies. Yes, we captured cities. But each success cost more than the last. Vehicles broke down faster than they could be repaired. We still won on paper, but the victories no longer felt decisive. The Soviet Union did not collapse under the weight of its losses. It absorbed them. And with every army we surrounded, the next one fought harder, as if it had learned something essential, that survival depended not on avoiding defeat, but on making us pay for every kilometer. We had expected one final blow. Stalingrad was the moment the war stopped moving forward. Until then, even when things went badly, we still believed in recovery. Another regrouping, another clever maneuver. But on the Volga, the Wehrmacht was finally struck hard enough to feel it in its bones. Not a setback, not a delay, a bloody nose that would not stop bleeding. The city itself was already a ruin when we entered it. Smoke never left the sky. Buildings were not captured so much as contested. Room by room, floor by floor, sometimes stair by stair. A factory could change hands 3 times in a day. A single wall could be a front line. There was no maneuver left, no elegance, only proximity. You could hear the enemy breathing through the rubble. The Soviet soldiers fought like men who had nowhere else to go. They came out of basements, sewers, and collapsed stairwells. Snipers learned our habits and punished them. Artillery turned streets into graves and then shelled them again. There was no rear anymore, only varying degrees of danger. Even sleep became a risk. And slowly, we changed. The uniforms grew ragged, the confidence drained away. Officers who once spoke of victory now spoke only of holding on until nightfall. Supplies failed to arrive. Wounded men froze where they fell. The cold was merciless, but worse was the realization that no one was coming to save us, not in time, not in strength. We heard the word encirclement again, but this time it was ours. Watching the army fade was like watching a familiar face starve. The discipline remained, mostly. The pride tried to hold on. Tanks stood silent, fuelless monuments. Units that once marched in perfect order now existed only as names on paper. Men were no longer replaced. Losses became permanent. What remained was a ghost of the force we had been. At Stalingrad, the Wehrmacht did not just lose a battle, it lost its illusion, the belief that it was untouchable. After Stalingrad, everything felt like a reckoning delayed, but Kursk was meant to cancel it. That was how it was spoken of, at least. One decisive blow. One last, overwhelming concentration of strength that would smash the Red Army and restore what had been lost. The officers called it necessary. The veterans called it dangerous. But everyone understood what it really was. They gathered everything. Panzer divisions that had once ruled Europe rolled east again, rebuilt and reinforced. New machines appeared, Tigers, Panthers, massive guns that promised invincibility on paper. The crews spoke of armor, thickness, and firepower with something close to pride. If victory still existed, surely it would come on steel tracks, but the enemy was waiting. The Soviet defenses around Kursk were not improvised, not rushed. They were deliberate, layered, patient. Minefields stretched farther than we could see. Trenches upon trenches. Anti-tank guns hidden with terrifying discipline. They had learned us too well, our timing, our doctrine, our faith in the breakthrough. When the attack began, the ground itself seemed to rebel. Tanks burned before reaching the first line. Others threw tracks on mines, became immobile targets, then wrecks. The air filled with smoke and dust, and the screams of metal tearing itself apart. Radio chatter turned frantic, then silent. For the first time, our panzer units were not feared. They were hunted. I watched machines that once symbolized certainty reduced to twisted hulks. Crews bailed out on fire, some making it only a few steps. Commanders who had led lightning advances now begged for recovery vehicles that never came. The battlefield was littered with wreckage so dense it felt like a graveyard built in a single day. And the Soviets did not panic. They absorbed the blow, then answered it. Counterattacks came relentlessly. The pride of the Panzer Arm died there, not in one dramatic moment, but piece by piece, as division after division was ground down without achieving anything decisive. No breakthrough, no encirclement. Just loss, irreplaceable loss. Crews we could not replace, tanks we could not rebuild, time we did not have. When the fighting finally slowed, the silence felt different from before. Kursk was the last time we tried to win the war in the East. After that, we only tried to survive it. And as we pulled back, leaving burned-out armor behind us, it was impossible not to see the truth written across the fields. The Wehrmacht, that had once conquered at will, was gone. What remained still fought, but the pride, the dominance, the belief in inevitable victory had been destroyed. The retreat did not feel like a movement on a map. It felt like erosion. After Kursk, the losses became impossible to disguise. Divisions that once numbered tens of thousands were reduced to fragments. Replacements arrived too young, too old, too unprepared, and often not at all. The Red Army followed relentlessly, stronger each month, better equipped, certain now of its purpose. And as we moved west, we passed through the evidence of what we had done. Villages burned long before the retreat began. Fields stripped bare. Civilians displaced, starved, terrorized in the name of security and necessity. We had been told it was required. We had been told it was policy. We had been told it was war in the East, different from the West, harsher by nature. At the time, many of us accepted it. Some participated. Some looked away. Few resisted. Now, walking back through those same lands, the silence accused us. I remember faces, women clutching children, old men standing in doorways. Remember eyes that did not plead anymore, only watched. They had learned what German rule meant. Punishments without explanation, violence delivered as routine. Whatever order we claimed to bring was built on fear and suffering, and we carried that knowledge with us as we retreated. It became harder to tell ourselves we were only soldiers, harder to pretend that discipline absolved us, or that obedience erased responsibility. The farther west we moved, the heavier that weight became. Defeat stripped away the excuses. Victory might have buried the truth, but retreat dragged it into the open. By the time we reached German soil, the army was barely an army. Men marched who no longer believed in slogans or promises. Cities lay in ruins behind us and ahead of us. The war we had brought east had come home, and it did not distinguish between guilt and innocence any better than we once had. What haunted me most was not only what we lost, but what we had become along the way. We had crossed borders believing ourselves dominant, efficient, destined to rule. We returned diminished, carrying the memory of destroyed armies and destroyed lives. Survival did not feel like victory. It felt like a sentence, to live with the knowledge that our defeat was deserved, not only because we were beaten, but because of the cruelty we helped unleash, and the price others paid, long before we ever began to pay our own.